It started innocently enough, or so I thought. The late-night texts, the sudden obsession with her phone, and her newfound me time all seemed like harmless changes at first. I had always trusted Laura. After all, we had been married for 8 years, shared 2 beautiful kids, and built what I thought was a rock-solid life together. But over time, those small, seemingly innocent shifts began to pile up, forming a picture I couldn't ignore. Laura had always been an extrovert, the life of the party. I loved that about her. She had a magnetic energy that drew people in, and I was proud to call her my wife. But recently, that same energy seemed to be directed elsewhere. When I tried to talk about it, she brushed me off with a casual, "You're overthinking things," or "I just need some space to rediscover myself." It was during one of her late-night girls' nights that my doubts began to solidify. She had left the house in a dress that I hadn't seen before, a tight, revealing number that seemed more appropriate for a club than a casual evening with friends. When I jokingly commented on it, her response was icy. "Can't I dress up for myself for once?" "Do I always have to get your approval?" she snapped. Her reaction stung, but I let it slide. I wasn't the controlling type and didn't want to come off as insecure. Yet, as the clock ticked past midnight, and then 2 a.m. without a single update from Laura, my unease grew. She finally stumbled in at 3:30 a.m., smelling of wine and carrying a faint whiff of cologne that wasn't hers. She mumbled something about losing track of time before collapsing into bed. The next morning, Laura acted as if nothing had happened. She made pancakes for the kids, chatted about weekend plans, and laughed at our youngest attempts to flip a pancake. I watched her from the doorway, my stomach churning. Something was off, and I couldn't shake the feeling. Deciding to trust but verify, I began paying closer attention. Over the next few weeks, the signs became impossible to ignore. Laura's phone was practically glued to her hand, and she'd grown unusually secretive about it. Whenever it buzzed, she'd glance at the screen and smile, quickly tucking it away. Her excuses for being out late became flimsier. Work meetings that didn't align with her schedule, errands that lasted hours, and the ever-elusive catching up with old friends. Then came the day I found the receipt. It was crumpled in the pocket of her jeans as I tossed them into the laundry. A charge from a high-end restaurant downtown. Dated the same night, she claimed to be at book club. My heart sank as I stared at the slip, the name of the restaurant glaring back at me. I knew for a fact Laura had never mentioned going there, certainly not with her book club. When I confronted her that evening, Laura's reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of denial, tears, or apologies, she gave me a tired look, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steady but devoid of warmth. I braced myself. "Talk about what, Laura?" "About how you've been lying to me. About how you're sneaking around." She sighed, setting her wine glass on the counter. "I'm not sneaking around. I've been seeing someone." I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. The air seemed thicker, harder to breathe. "You're seeing someone? You're married. We have kids, Laura. What the hell are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that I'm not happy," she shot back, her tone sharpening. "I haven't been for a long time. I'm tired of pretending everything's okay when it's not." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Not happy? When were you planning to tell me? Or did you think sneaking around was the answer?" Laura folded her arms, her expression defiant. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way, but yes, I've met someone. He makes me feel alive again." I stared at her, disbelief and fury swirling inside me. "Alive? You have 2 kids, a family. Does that mean nothing to you?" "Of course it does," she snapped. "But I'm done living in a marriage where I feel trapped. I need freedom. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm telling you how it is." For a moment, I was too stunned to speak. When I finally found my voice, it was low and cold. "So, what's your plan? You think I'll just sit back while you're off living some fantasy?" Laura hesitated, then lifted her chin. I think we need to redefine what this marriage looks like. I want us to stay together for the kids, but I also want the freedom to see other people. Her audacity left me speechless. The woman I thought I knew, my partner, my best friend, was standing before me, demanding to keep our life intact while she pursued her own desires. It was a slap in the face, and my mind raced with the implications. After a long, tense silence, I finally spoke. You want freedom? Fine, you can have it. But don't expect me to stick around and watch you destroy everything we built. Laura blinked, clearly taken aback by my response. What does that mean? It means I'm done too, Laura. If you want out, I won't stop you, but I'll be damned if I'm part of this twisted arrangement. I turned and walked out of the room, my heart pounding. I knew this was just the beginning of the storm, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let Laura dictate the terms of my life. If she wanted freedom, she would get it, but on my terms. I spent that night on the couch, staring at the ceiling and trying to piece together what had just happened. The Laura I knew or thought I knew had been replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I wanted to storm back into the bedroom, demand answers, scream at her for turning my life upside down. But what good would that do? Instead, I laid there in silence, feeling the weight of her betrayal crushing me. The next morning, Laura acted as if everything was normal. She got the kids ready for school, packed their lunches, and even asked if I wanted coffee. I couldn't believe her audacity. I mumbled a no and left the house early, desperate to escape the suffocating tension. At work, I could barely focus. My colleagues noticed something was off, but I wasn't ready to share my personal life with them. Instead, I buried myself in emails and meetings, hoping the distractions would help. They didn't. By lunchtime, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let Laura call the shots. If she wanted freedom, she could have it, but there would be consequences. That evening, I came home earlier than usual. Laura was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone while the kids did their homework at the dining table. She looked up briefly, her expression unreadable, then returned to her screen. I took a deep breath and made my way to the kids. "Hey, how's the homework going?" I asked, ruffling our son's hair. He grinned up at me, oblivious to the storm brewing between his parents. I forced a smile, determined to keep things as normal as possible for their sake. After dinner, I asked Laura if we could talk. She hesitated but eventually nodded. We went into the living room, leaving the kids occupied with a movie. I could feel my heart pounding as I sat across from her, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began. "About wanting freedom." She raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by my calm tone. "And if that's what you want, I won't stand in your way. But I'm not going to live like this. We'll need to separate." Laura's face fell. "Separate? James, I didn't mean for it to come to that. I thought we could figure something out for the kids." "The kids will be fine," I said firmly. "But I'm not going to stay in a marriage where you're seeing someone else. That's not fair to me, and it's not fair to them. And what about the house? The finances? The kids' schedules?" she asked, her voice rising. "You're just going to throw all that away?" I shook my head. "We'll work it out. But this..." I gestured between us. "This isn't working anymore. You made your choice, Laura. Now I'm making mine." For the first time since our confrontation, I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes. But it was too late. The damage was done, and there was no going back. I've always prided myself on being a man who could handle anything life threw at him. But sitting in that living room with Laura, I realized I was out of my depth. Separation felt like the right move, but the logistics, splitting up our lives, explaining it to the kids, navigating the awkwardness, loomed over me like a storm cloud. Still, I knew staying in a toxic arrangement would do more harm than good. The next few days were a blur. Laura and I operated like strangers in our own home, communicating only when absolutely necessary. I started sleeping in the guest room, a small, stuffy space I'd barely noticed before. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a temporary refuge from the chaos. Meanwhile, I began quietly researching divorce attorneys and taking note of our financial situation. If Laura wanted freedom, she'd have to face the reality of what that meant. One night, as I was scrolling through potential lawyers online, I stumbled upon an email notification from our joint bank account. It was a large withdrawal, several $1,000s. My chest tightened as I opened the app to check the details. The money had been transferred to an account I didn't recognize. "Laura," I called out, my voice sharper than I intended. She appeared in the doorway, her expression wary. "What? Did you take money out of our account?" I asked, holding up my phone. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I needed it." "Needed it for what?" I demanded. "You can't just drain our savings without telling me." "I used it to pay for something important," she said defensively, crossing her arms. "And before you start accusing me, it's for the kids." Something about her tone didn't sit right. "For the kids? What exactly did you spend thousands of dollars on?" "It's none of your business, James," she snapped. "I'm their mother. I know what they need." Her evasiveness only fueled my suspicions. I stared at her, the woman I'd once trusted with everything, and realized I couldn't take her at her word anymore. "You're right. You are their mother. But that doesn't mean you get to make unilateral decisions with our money. If this is how it's going to be, we're going to need more than a separation." Her eyes widened. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I've already started looking into it." For a moment, Laura looked genuinely shaken, but just as quickly, her expression hardened. "Fine. Do what you need to do." Her indifference stung, but I held my ground. That night, I emailed one of the lawyers I'd found, setting up a consultation. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I needed someone in my corner. The following week, things escalated in ways I couldn't have imagined. I came home early from work one day to find a strange car parked in our driveway. My gut twisted as I walked up to the house, my mind racing with possibilities. Inside, I heard laughter, Laura's voice mixed with a man's. I told myself I wouldn't lose my temper, no matter what. But hearing her so at ease with someone else in our home made my blood boil. I stepped into the living room and found them sitting on the couch, too close for comfort. Laura's eyes widened when she saw me. "James, what are you doing home?" she asked, standing quickly. The man beside her looked uncomfortable but didn't move. I ignored him, focusing on Laura. "I could ask you the same thing. Who's this?" "This is the friend," she said, her voice faltering. "A friend?" I repeated, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "Does your friend know you're still married?" The man stood then, holding up his hands. "Look, I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I'll leave." "You're damn right you will," I snapped, pointing toward the door. He glanced at Laura, who nodded reluctantly, and then quickly made his exit. Once he was gone, I turned back to her. "Are you out of your mind? Bringing him here? What if the kids had seen?" "They weren't home," she said, as if that made it acceptable. "That's not the point, Laura. This is our house. Our kids live here. Do you have any idea how disrespectful this is?" "You're the one who said we're separating," she shot back. "What do you care who I spend time with?" "I care because this isn't just about you," I said, my voice rising. "Everything you do affects our family. Or have you forgotten that?" She didn't respond, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt in her expression. It wasn't enough to undo the damage, but it was something. That night, I stayed up late, replaying the confrontation in my mind. I couldn't keep living like this, walking on eggshells and waiting for the next blow. I needed to take control of the situation. The next day, I met with the lawyer I'd contacted. She was sharp, professional, and didn't sugarcoat anything. "Divorces like this can get messy," she said. "But if you're prepared to stand your ground, We can make sure you and your kids come out of this okay." Hearing her confidence gave me a sliver of hope. I explained everything: the infidelity, Laura's erratic behavior, the financial concerns. By the end of our meeting, we had a plan in place. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I had a path forward. When I got home that evening, Laura was waiting for me in the kitchen. She looked tired, her usual defiance replaced by something softer. "We need to talk," she said. "I'm listening," I replied cautiously. I've been thinking about everything," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "About what I've done, what this is doing to the kids. Maybe we've both made mistakes." Her words caught me off guard. For a moment, I wondered if this was her way of trying to fix things. But then I remembered the man in our living room, the missing money, the countless lies. Mistakes? Laura, this isn't just a mistake. It's a pattern, and it's not something I can ignore. She nodded slowly, tears welling in her eyes. "I know. I don't want to lose everything." "You should have thought of that before," I said, my tone firm but not unkind. "We can figure out how to co-parent. But as far as our marriage goes, I'm done." The words hung in the air, final and irreversible. Laura didn't argue. She simply nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. In that moment, I felt a pang of sadness for what we'd lost. But more than that, I felt relief. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least now I could see a way forward. I thought things couldn't get any worse, but life had a way of proving me wrong. With the divorce in motion, Laura's behavior grew more erratic. She alternated between pleading with me to reconsider and lashing out in anger when I refused. It was exhausting, but I kept my focus on the kids and the future I was trying to build for them. Then one day, out of nowhere, everything took a turn I never saw coming. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a text from Laura. "We need to talk. It's about the kids." My stomach dropped. Laura rarely mentioned the kids in her recent tirades, so for her to bring them up now felt ominous. I called her immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. Panic began to set in. I left work early, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. When I got home, Laura was waiting in the living room, her expression grim. "We have a problem," she said. "What kind of problem?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She handed me an envelope. Inside were legal documents, a court summons. Laura had filed for full custody of the kids. I stared at the papers in disbelief. "What the hell is this?" I demanded, turning to Laura. She crossed her arms, her expression defiant. "You wanted a divorce, James. Well, this is part of it. I'm not going to let you take my kids away." "Take them away?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I've never tried to do that. I've done everything to keep things civil for their sake. And this is how you repay me." "You're the one who's been plotting behind my back," she shot back. "You're the one who started this war." Her words felt like a slap in the face. I'd spent weeks walking on eggshells, trying to shield the kids from the fallout of our crumbling marriage. And now she was framing me as a villain? "You're unbelievable," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "This isn't about the kids. This is about you trying to control everything." "Well, guess what? I'm not backing down." The custody battle became a new layer of hell. Laura's lawyer painted me as an absent, unfit father who cared more about his career than his family. I fought back with everything I had, but the stress was overwhelming. The endless court hearings, it was all too much. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, the bombshell dropped. During one of the hearings, Laura's lawyer presented a witness, a private investigator she'd hired. The man claimed he'd followed me for weeks and had evidence of an affair. I was floored. "That's a lie," I said, standing up in the courtroom. "I've never cheated." But the investigator produced grainy photos of me meeting a female colleague at a coffee shop. The pictures were innocent. just two co-workers discussing a project. But Laura's lawyer spun it into something scandalous. "This is ridiculous. I told my lawyer during a break. They're grasping at straws." "Maybe," she said, her tone grim. "But in cases like this, perception can outweigh the truth. We need to discredit their narrative." The trial dragged on for weeks, each day more draining than the last. Then one night, I received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "You deserve to know the truth." The message contained a video file. Heart pounding, I clicked on it. The footage showed Laura meeting with a man in a dimly lit parking lot. They exchanged a briefcase, and though the audio was muffled, I could make out snippets of their conversation. "Are you sure this will work?" Laura asked. "Positive," the man replied. "Just stick to the plan." My blood ran cold. Laura had orchestrated the entire custody battle with lies and fabricated evidence. This wasn't just about our marriage. It was a calculated attempt to destroy me. I forwarded the video to my lawyer immediately. "This changes everything," she said. "We need to get this in front of the judge." The next day in court, we presented the video as evidence. Laura's face went pale as the footage played. Her lawyer tried to object, but the damage was done. The judge ordered an investigation, and within days, the truth came to light. Laura had hired someone to manipulate the custody case in her favor. The fallout was swift. Laura lost her bid for full custody, and the judge granted me primary custody of the kids. She was ordered to attend counseling and pay a hefty fine for her actions. As for me, I finally felt vindicated, but the victory was bittersweet. Our family had been shattered, and there was no putting the pieces back together. Now, as I sit here reflecting on everything, I'm filled with a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, relief, but most of all, determination. I've been through hell, but I'm still standing. And for my kids, I'll keep fighting, no matter what comes next. The day after the judge ruled in my favor, I woke up to a strange silence in the house. The kids were still asleep, and for the first time in months, there was no tension, no fights waiting to erupt. It felt foreign, almost unnerving, but I welcomed it. It was the beginning of a new chapter, and I intended to make it a good one. Despite the victory, I knew the hard work wasn't over. Laura was still their mother, and no court ruling could erase that. The kids loved her, and no matter how furious I wasn't going to let them be caught in the middle. So I made the first move. I texted her, "We need to talk about a co-parenting schedule." Her reply came quickly. "Fine." When we agreed to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop close to the kids' school. When I walked in, Laura was already there, looking more tired than I'd ever seen her. Gone was the defiant woman who had tried to tear me down in court. In her place was someone who looked beaten by the consequences of her own choices. "Thanks for coming," I said, sitting down across from her. She nodded, stirring her coffee absently. "I want to do what's best for the kids," she said, her voice quiet. "I know I've made mistakes." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing to one I'd heard from her in months. I decided to take the olive branch. "We need to put them first," I agreed. "They've been through enough." We spent the next hour hammering out a schedule. Weekends with Laura, weekdays with me. Holidays would be split. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. For the first time, we were working together for the sake of our kids, not against each other. As we finalized the details, Laura looked up at me. "Do you hate me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question caught me off guard. Did I? After everything she'd done, was there still a part of me that cared for the woman I'd once loved? I thought about the years we'd spent together, the family we'd built, and the betrayal that had torn it apart. "I don't hate you," I said finally, "but I don't trust you either. That's something you're going to have to earn back, not from me, but from the kids." She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "You'll try." Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. The kids adjusted surprisingly well to the changes. They spent their weekends with Laura, who seemed genuinely committed to rebuilding her relationship with them. I focused on being the best father I could be during the week, throwing myself into school projects, soccer practices, and bedtime stories. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when the pain of what Laura had done resurfaced, moments when I doubted whether I was strong enough to move forward. But then I'd see the kids' smiles, hear their laughter, and remember why I was fighting so hard. They were my anchor, my reason to keep going. Then one evening, as I was helping my daughter with her homework, my phone buzzed with a message from Laura. "Can I call you?" I hesitated before replying. Sure, her voice was shaky when she spoke. I wanted to thank you," she said, "for not shutting me out, for letting me still be part of their lives. They need you." I replied simply, "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for them." "I know," she said, "but it means more than you realize." For a moment, there was silence. Then she added, "I've been going to counseling. I'm trying to figure out why I did what I did, why I hurt you the way I did." Her honesty caught me off guard. "That's a good start," I said. "The kids deserve the best version of you." The years rolled on, and slowly, the wounds began to heal. Laura and I never rekindled our relationship, but we found a way to coexist as co-parents. The kids grew up happy and well-adjusted, and that was all I could have asked for. One day, as I was packing up old photo albums to move into a new house, I stumbled upon a picture of our family from years ago. We were at the beach, the kids building sandcastles, while Laura and I laughed at something I couldn't remember. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness for what we'd lost. But then I thought about how far we'd come, how much stronger the kids and I had become through it all. Life doesn't always go the way you plan. People change, betrayals happen, and sometimes the only thing you can do is pick up the pieces and move forward. That's what I did, and in the end, it made me a better father and a stronger person. Now, as I watch my kids thrive, I know one thing for sure. No matter how dark things get, there's always a way to find the light. You just have to keep moving toward it.